As I'm sure many of you know, I've been a fan of Kane Pixel's work for a long time. So I was thrilled when I heard that someone who I not only consider a great filmmaker, but a friend, was making a theatrical release with A24. And Kane was kind enough to invite me, my wife, and my editor up to Vancouver to film behind the scenes. I got to see how the movie was made, talk to a lot of really cool people, and that video is now up on the channel. But despite all of that, there's still a little bit of uncertainty going into these things. I mean, obviously, I know Kane's very talented, and I was sure he was going to make a great movie, but translating things from the internet to the big screen, you're not sure how it will always pan out. Will people really show up for it? Am I just too in the zone online, and the hype isn't as big outside of the internet as I might believe it to be? Well, the film released at the end of last month, and currently has made over $260 million at the box office. Despite its budget of $10 million, it's tracking to make about $300 million at the box office, and that number puts it above several Star Wars, superhero, or Disney films. It is not only the biggest opening weekend and the highest earning film in A24's history after only a few weeks, but Kane has now become the youngest director ever to have a #1 box office movie. And to describe how I feel about all of that, I think you should pick up the phone that's right there. You know why you should pick it up? Because I called it! #1 in the studio, in the world, #1 of all time. This guy was making #1 movies from his bedroom, and now he's making them at the box office. No one has ever won this much. This guy. He makes movies on YouTube, and then they give him one shot, just one, and he knocks it out of the park. I have been saying for years that this guy is going to become one of the biggest directors of all time if someone gives him a chance. And he became the biggest director in the world on his first try. I can't, what is there left to say? He won. He did it. And most importantly, I was right. Do you see this guy? Do you see this face? This is what success looks like. I can't even put it to words. One movie, straight from YouTube to one movie, biggest in the world. For a decade, studios have been making stupid, well, not every movie, but a lot of movies have just been the same, recycled garbage no one cares about. I don't care about. And so many of us said, this is the guy, just do one thing with him. And they do it, and it's now undeniable. It's now the biggest thing ever, and everyone wants a piece of the Kane pie. It demolished a Star Wars movie that was out at the same time. Star Wars. This guy beat Star Wars. I was at a meeting before the movie came out, and I told some Hollywood people that I think the Backrooms is going to do $100 million in its opening weekend, and they laughed. That was a laughable concept, and this guy did that plus another $18 million. I shouldn't even need to make the rest of this video anymore. He won. We did it. We can go home. If you look up a goat in the dictionary, it's this picture. If you look up the definition of the word him, it's this guy. All that it took was a single studio to give one analog horror scary YouTube video guy a shot, and then it has changed the landscape of Hollywood forever. And man, the number of people, before this came out, the number of talks you would see in tabloids and journals that'll be like, wow, this studio took a big risk. Imagine if it goes wrong. Imagine if it's a total box office bomb. Well, I guess you've got to keep imagining. Call that the Backrooms, because it's sure not our reality. Because this guy can't lose. This guy's never lost before, and it's not starting now, and he's here to stay. So, yeah, I thought the movie was pretty good. Jokes aside, I am incredibly proud of Kane. First time I met him, I said this guy is going to be one of the great filmmakers of our time, and it looks like he's already there. And he is 20 years old. Did you know that? Because every article that has ever spoken about him makes sure you know that. Except the New York Post, which just doxed his home address. Very cool of them. I think this is an incredible achievement, not just for Kane or for horror movies, but for creators as a whole. And not to oversimplify, Kane had a ton of incredible people, some of which I got to meet on this project, who made it possible. And part of the reason studios are shifting so heavily to YouTube isn't only the Backrooms, but also Obsession by Curry Barker. Curry Barker is another YouTuber who got his start by making horror movies and comedy videos on YouTube. So at the same time, the two best performing movies in the world are both low budget films made by YouTubers. And most importantly, they're both really good. Obsession was fantastic. The script for that was so tight, and Indy as the lead actress killed it. I love that whole movie and could make a whole video about it alone. But today, I'm talking about the Backrooms. Kane didn't just make a great film, he made a great continuation of the YouTube series. There's so much learned within this edition, it confirms so many things that we've theorized about before, but it also opens the door on whole new realms of speculation. In the best way, it feels like another entry in the YouTube series, just with a bigger budget and more actors. And I appreciate how Kane used these new expenditures to just do more of what he was already doing. If you watch enough directors for long enough, you start to pick up on their style, their do's and don'ts through the screen. And there were so many scenes in this film that felt like I was watching one of Kane's web series. And the story that was told through the film, I think, was an excellent choice. I said in my last video about the Backrooms, I don't think the movie will be about async and researchers or Ivan Beck. I said that I think it'll be a story that will lead to an introduction to the Backrooms to many, about everyday people finding themselves within the complex. And the character arcs that were chosen fit so well into not only the everyday man idea of what happens if normal people come across this space, but it's a great story whose roots transfer itself so well to the nature of the complex itself. And as far as the lore goes, like I said, some things were confirmed, but so many things got flipped on their head. So I want to go through my experience watching the film, some of the reactions around it, what it was like being on set. But I also want to talk about the plot of the movie itself, what I think works so well about it, and then get into theories for what this means for the future of not only the Complex and the Backroom series, but for potential future adaptations. Kane has said that the story is not over yet, and he has ideas from a mini-series to another feature. And I think a lot of clues of what might be next are already set up within this first film. And all of that is exactly what I want to talk about today. So, hello everybody. Today we're talking about Kane Parsons' Backrooms. This time, on the big screen. Now, it goes without saying that I am going to be talking about spoilers a lot. Even just some of the clips I show from behind the scenes are a spoiler in themselves. So, and I know a lot of you already have, but if you have not watched the Backrooms for yourself, please go do that now. It's an incredible film. It's a one-of-a-kind experience to those who are familiar with the web series and those who are not. So please go check it out, and then you can come back and then we can talk about it. I don't want to rob you from what it's like to experience this film for the first time. The film also has a lot of divisiveness around it. I feel like people either really like it or really don't like it. And I think that comes down a lot to what you were expecting going in and if what the film is trying to do connects with you. I also kind of want to talk about where I think some of those discrepancies might be, or maybe some misconceptions with the film are. And overall, I just want to talk about this movie that I think is going to be incredibly impactful over the next several years. So if that sounds interesting to you, then stick around after the ad as we talk about the new nightmares of Kane's Backrooms. Do you want to talk about nightmares, Kane? Kane wants to talk about nightmares. It's the summer, and there's a lot you probably want to go do instead of staying cramped inside all day. Can't relate. But regardless if you're on the go or just want a good meal you don't have to worry about, today's sponsor Factor is here to help. Factor delivers chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals straight to your door. Their meals are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, meaning you can spend your summer days in the hot weather outside instead of in a hot kitchen. Factor meals are made with balanced macros, real ingredients, and at least 2 vegetables per meal. This makes hitting your nutritional goals easier than ever. And there's no planning, no prep, and no cleanup, meaning the day doesn't have to stop just because you're hungry. And they keep adding more and more international meal options like elote corn and miso edamame. Factor has hundreds of options, from their meals to their juices to their energy bars. And I guarantee you'll find something that you fall in love with. I used to be picky about what meals Factor would send me for these ads, but recently, they can just send me whatever they want. I don't know how they get that quality of food out of a microwavable meal, but I'm impressed every time. 97% of people have said that Factor helps them live a healthier life, and 92% say it makes their life less stressful. So you could get in and make those numbers 98 and 93%. It's not how percentages work, but just pretend like it does. And right now is the perfect time to get in on Factor. That's because if you scan the QR code or head to the link in the description at factor75.com and use the code Wendigoon FB50, you'll get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for a year. That's right, for new customers with the code and a qualifying auto-renewing subscription, you get free breakfast for a year and half off your first box. Again, that's scan the QR code or head to the link in the description at factor75.com and use code Wendigoon FB50 to get in on Factor today. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring the channel. Their link will be in the description, and we are now back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. So what's interesting about Kane taking his series from YouTube to the big screen is he really gets a do-over, right? I mean, there's so much lore and continuity established in the YouTube series. I mean, I have hours of footage talking about it. And not to say Kane is restricted as to what he can do with the Backrooms on YouTube, but there's certainly a direction that's been chosen, right? Most things are focused around async. If random people do drop into the Backrooms, they're there for 1 minute and typically die by the end. So with the opportunity to make a feature film, Kane can sort of reset perspective for a new audience. And I don't know all of the details, but I've talked to Kane and listened to Kane in some interviews about what that initial development process was like. And Kane's proof watching this video, by the way, so anything I leak, he gave his blessing on. A24. Please don't kill me. But I know initially the idea for the script went through a few different variations. For a while, I believe the plan was to make a film focused on async and on their side of the whole ordeal. But like I talked about in my previous video regarding the Backrooms and the lead up to the film, I feel like that is a lot to drop on an audience. If it was a TV show, for example, I think it'd be way more palatable to frame all of this around the company that works with the DOE and has some shadowy figure named Ivan Beck pulling things behind the scenes. But for a film where you also have to introduce to a lot of people what the Backrooms even is, that's a lot. So the eventual version they put forward, with the screenplay written by Will Sudik, focuses instead on a group of people unfamiliar with the complex encountering it for the first time. And what I think really works about the script they chose is the core themes in the character arcs between our two primary protagonists, Clark and Mary, tie into the nature of the complex itself to the degree that analyzing their stories gives us a better understanding of the Backrooms as a whole. So before I get into the film itself, I kind of want to talk a little bit about my experience chronologically as it came to the film, just to kind of set the stage for where I'm coming from. So as the Backrooms got into production, I didn't talk to Kane that much. As you could imagine, he was busy. But when someone on TikTok leaked a video of what they claimed to be A24 shooting the Backrooms on their street in Canada, I sent a screenshot to Kane and asked if it was real. And he said no and sent me this video.
And then we both off.
It looks okay from here.
From there, he sent me a bunch of cool behind-the-scenes stuff, from pictures of the set and them shooting some scenes. But then, with no context, he sends me this image. And he gave no further explanation to what this image is. So I have to be like, I guess that's a still life. I guess I know what those look like up close now. Which obviously, after watching the film, we know what it is, but just keep in mind, I had to keep this to myself for over a year. Well, no, it's June now. It's almost a year. But obviously, you know me. This got me more excited than ever. We were going to see new stuff in the movie. The sets look fantastic. So, of course, when Kane asked if I wanted to come interview him on set and get some behind-the-scenes footage for an eventual video, I said yes. When I got to the set in Vancouver, and I showed some clips of this in the interview that I did with Kane, but I don't think I'll ever quit being impressed with how seriously this production was taken. I'm positive that if the wrong studio picked this up, or if there was just an argument one in the other direction in a conversation somewhere, that this movie would have been entirely blue screen and it would have been way easier to just shoot on a soundstage. But the tone I got for the day I was there is that Kane has a vision, so whatever everyone needs to do to make that come to life. These massive lots, they had carpenters come in and build the wooden framework and put down carpet and put up wallpaper, put in drop tile ceilings and fluorescent lights. Everyone from the studio to the actors to the crew believed in the project. And as we're going to talk about in a second, it's not like this was a paint-by-number script or, the next person gets possessed by something or killer thing tries to kill people plot. The writing was different than the mainstream. The concept was different from the mainstream. Of course, those of us who are online as much as we are probably saw this for the gem that it was, that so many people are interested in the Backrooms, it'll probably do great. And another one of the most impressive things about this shoot to me was, of course, Kane. The technical teams were great, everything from the lighting to the sound department to the camera operators. Chadwell had already wrapped by the time I got there, but Renat and Mark were on set when I was there. And watching them do their thing that they're so well known for is incredible. But what really stood out to me was Kane. Kane at this time was 19 years old, and watching him direct for a day, you would think he's been doing it his whole life. Plus, longer than his only 19 years of life. When it came to how the film was presented, from how it would look or how he wanted certain scenes to play out, it's like the guy was a machine. He knew exactly where he wanted things to be, how he wanted the actors to behave. It's like all of this was already put together in his mind, and he was just translating that to make it a reality. I've said for a long time that Kane is going to become one of the great directors of our generation, and it was amazing to watch that before anyone else got to see it. The people who were on set got to see it. You get what I mean. But of course, me being me, Kane's cool and all, but what I was there for were the weird yellow hallways. And the reports are not a lie. There was over 30,000 square feet of space built up between these multiple hangars. Save for a few sections where, for the sake of direction, certain hallways or corners had to be basically cut and then put somewhere else, you could just keep walking through these things. Twice, while getting deep into the sets themselves to take videos and photos, I would try to head back to the upfront main area where everyone was gathered and got lost. I would be like, I think it's definitely this direction. And then I'd walk that way for a while and open a door, and it would be a wall of the studio. And I'd actually gone the complete opposite direction. And of course, I'm looking for all the lore stuff. So I go into the room with the Christmas tree and see the people in the ground. And I'm like, those are still lives or echoes of people's memories from this space. I saw the blood and feathers on the wall from where in the film the bird hits the wall. And I'm like, oh, that's definitely a bird no-clipped and then hit the wall here. Got it. The thing that I got to be there for that was so hard. Not hard not to say, because I never do that. I'd never leak details of, the film before it came out. But was so hard to not talk about for so long was the pirate. For the Backrooms, Robert Babraci was best known for playing the weird alien baby thing at the end of Alien Romulus. So I saw him on set when I got there and was like, oh cool, he must be playing one of the life forms. That's awesome. And then Kane, who, mind you, has told me nothing about the film or the script or the plot or anything like that. Most of what I knew about the film was viral Twitter posts saying who's starring in it and whatnot. So I come up to Kane when I see him, and I'm like, oh, is he playing a life form? And Kane's like, no, that's the pirate. To which I say, what? And Kane's like, yeah, the pirate. You'll see. So then about midway through the shooting day, Robert comes out, and they put him in a giant pirate costume. It's hard for me to express how simultaneously exciting and frustrating this was. Because everyone else is working and doing stuff, and I'm just looking at him with 1,000-yard stare, trying to figure out what this means. I was so in the dark at this point that I knew Chiwetel Ejiofor was in the movie, but I didn't know if he was an async researcher or a victim or what. I had no idea about a furniture store or a Captain Clark or anything related to do with pirates. And then I stand just off set as they film the whole scene with the pirate chasing Mary into the narrow chasm and it reaching for her. And then the async researchers grabbing her as she comes out and all that. And I just had to sit with that for months until the first trailer came out and showed Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. And I went, oh, that guy was a still life of Clark. That makes sense. Not whatever I was thinking. But yeah, in the months between then and the film coming out, I would see people speculating online and talking about what they're going to see in the movie. And the whole time in the back of my head, I'm just like, you people aren't ready. You have no idea what's about to happen to you. But I was incredibly grateful for the opportunity to come out to set. I did an interview with Kane, which again is posted, where we talk about kind of his inspiration for the film and long-term direction for the series and things like that. Then, months later, I was also very graciously invited out to the premiere in LA along with my wife, my videographer / editor, and my manager. And it was such a privilege to be in the first room in the world that got to see this movie. Not only were the incredibly talented people from the cast and crew there, but there were a ton of actors and big movie people who just showed up to watch it. Watching the movie, I was sitting right next to Supriya Ganesh, who plays Dr. Mohan in The Pit, a TV show I really like. So I was nerding out about that. And then when I was in line for the bathroom, I passed a guy who looked just like Dylan Minnette. So I went to Kane's girlfriend, Emma, and was like, that guy looked just like Dylan Minnette. And she's like, that is Dylan Minnette. I'm like, oh, well, that explains that. Like, Kane got to the big leagues and he looked like someone who always belonged in the big leagues. I was invited to stand next to the big leagues and acted like a child. I know if you're here for a Backrooms movie analysis, you don't care about me any, but it's my story to tell. So the most embarrassing thing that I did is when I got to the premiere, they were having the red carpet right before, which they switched out the red carpet for like a musty yellow carpet, which I thought was neat. But I get to the red carpet and there's just people standing everywhere. And I don't realize that I'm standing like in a crowd of like movie people. I thought it was all just like general audience. And I had been told before that, oh, when you get there, you know, we'll figure out where you go, where to get seats and stuff like that. So when I get to the theater, I walk up to the person I know from A24 and I'm like, hey, so where am I supposed to go? And they're like, oh, well, you know, you can just hang out, really whatever you want to do. So then I say, oh, that's great. Just get me out of the way. And what I meant by that is I don't want to be in anyone's way. I'm not important. Just throw me somewhere where I won't bother anyone or just tell me where to go stand, right? What that was taken as is, oh, I'm an important YouTuber, so I have to go first, which I didn't even know I was going to walk the car. I'm a YouTuber. I had no idea I was going to walk the carpet. Apparently that's common at these things, but whatever. So someone else on the press team there's like, oh, okay. And then takes my hand and takes me over to the carpet. And I realize what's happening. And I'm like, no, I didn't mean, no, not like that. Just hide me. Put me somewhere else. And they hold up a giant sign that says like Isaiah Wendigang Nichols or something like that. And they're like, right this way. And then they lead me by the hand in front of the cameras. And no, none of them know who I am. So they're like, oh, okay, this is the first guy that's walking, whatever. And they're taking pictures. And I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I'm looking over the top of the cameras and I see my wife cry laughing, looking at me because she realized what's happened. And if you look at all of the red carpet videos and pictures and stuff like that, you can see people on a crowded carpet. That's because they send everyone through for pictures at the same time. But if you look at my stupid little Getty image, I'm completely by myself. And it's because I accidentally implied that I am so important or whatever that I have to go first. Anyway, the premiere went great, got to meet a ton of cool people, and then there was an after party, and the after party space was dressed up to look like Clark's furniture store, which was really cool. So, you know, it had like couches and everything had sales stickers on them and a bunch of like Clark signs hung from the ceiling. And context, Kane had invited a bunch of his friends from high school and his high school film teacher to the premiere, which is really cool. And I got to talk to some of his friends and they were all great. But near the end of the night, as like the party's ending, I saw one of his high school friends walking out with a sign they had just taken down from the ceiling. Like, I don't know if they asked anyone or what it was, but he's just like, well, this is coming with me now. So I'm like, oh, we're stealing stuff? So I ripped one of the for sale stickers off one of the cabinets that was propped up to look like one of Clark's and stole that. It's around here somewhere. I don't know why I can't find it. But I mean, they were probably going to throw those things away, right? It's not really stealing if you think about it, right? A24. But all in all, it was an incredible experience. When I talked to Kane after the premiere, you know, I was telling him how proud I am, how much I love the movie. And he was so tired and out of it that the only thing he could get out was it good? And yes, Kane, it was good. You're okay. You can calm down now. But I say all that to say, mostly for humor, but also my experience with the film is far different than most. I got to see it early, right afterwards. I got to talk to a ton of people who were a part of it and get their thoughts on what certain things mean, what like the themes of the story were. I got to talk to a long time to Kane's father, the Dr. Clyde from the web series, mind you. And we talked a lot about like Clark's storyline and what this means for the future of the series, what this opens with new lore to the Backrooms. So by the time I went and saw it when it premiered across the country, I already had all of these like preconceived notions and theories I had been thinking on, and then I got to see what everyone else thought about it. Because of that, there were a lot of opinions that I can understand but can't really relate to just because of how I approached the movie. Like, for example, I saw a lot of people feeling one way or the other about the pirate, in the place of a life form, for example. Some really liked the pirate. Others initially were wishing that it was just a life form to be more like the web series. And it's hard for me to speak on that because I got to see the pirate nearly a year before the film came out. So, for example, I don't know what that initial reaction would be like had I not seen it, to see the pirate step into that dinner scene for the first time. But what I think my position does give me the privilege to speak on is the cohesion between a lot of different elements of the film. There's so many different pieces of the film that on their own are completely separate elements, but I feel like there's a through line that weaves them together enough to create a single tapestry. So enough talking about me, let's talk about the events of the movie and some things I gleaned off of it, and then we'll get into the theories and lore and all that. So the opening of the film is very true to the YouTube series. As a matter of fact, the first thing we see on screen is the async logo, which I just have to say, watching this for the first time and seeing on the big screen the logo, oh my gosh, it had me standing in my chair. From here, we cut to a POV from an async researcher lost somewhere within the complex. We'll later find out that this researcher's name is Naren Warren, and it seems he's transporting something. He has a blue satchel that he's carrying with him, but for whatever reason, it seems that he's lost. Maybe what happened to him is the same thing that happened to Peter in the web series. He simply glitched and appeared somewhere else away from his crew, or maybe he just got lost on an expedition. Seeing this first found footage segment on the big screen was also really reassuring as someone coming from the web series. Because, you never know how much of the original feel is really going to translate, but here it might as well be another entry online, in the best way. Wherever he is in the complex, it seems that Async's already been there. On the table, there's a bunch of radio equipment, and Naren, terrified, goes up to it, calling out for help, eventually saying that he's never been out this far. So, if the equipment relates back to Async, we can assume that Async has been out this far before and mapped it enough to leave all this stuff here. But it of course begs the question as to how Naren got lost out here in the first place. Also, seeing this radio equipment ties back to the web series when we see the giant radio tower that is found in Found Footage 3. Maybe that radio tower was another one of these async outposts. He eventually comes to a long hallway that, from what we see later, seems to be a complex copy of, at least part, of Clark's furniture store. It has the pirate wheel, it has several for sale banners, half clipped into the ceiling, and eventually we see an entity chase Naren, but I'll talk about that more later, as this is the same entity who shows up at the end of the film. Naren gets to a room that looks like a beachfront painting, but it wraps around every wall, and with nowhere to go as he makes his way back out, the entity kills him. And when this footage cuts, we see that a group of async researchers were watching this footage on screen. So even though Naren got lost out here, he seemingly found his way back to the complex representation of Clark's store. And even though he died, somehow Async got this tape back. There will be more lore implications on that later, but for now, we cut to our two primary characters of the film, Clark and Mary. From these first few shots outside of the found footage segment, we hear a narration from Mary that sets the groundwork for a lot of themes the film's going to be playing with. As she talks about overcoming obstacles and better understanding herself, we see on screen that she is witnessing the demolition of her childhood home, a home that, as we'll see later in the film, led to a lot of trauma. However, it's then revealed that Mary is saying all of this to Clark. Mary is Clark's therapist, and she's trying to help him work through a lot of his personal issues. And through a role-playing exercise the two do, Clark reenacts one of the last fights he had with his wife. It sounds like after this big fight the two had, Clark's wife Barbara kicked Clark out of the house. It seems when Clark was questioned as to why he was coming home drunk, he lashed out in anger. Now, from the clues we get of Clark throughout the rest of the film, it seems that he's definitely had a hard life. He wanted to be an architect. He had so many dreams and aspirations, but now he's married to someone who is trying to work their way through law school, so he has to support them, so he has this job running a furniture store. And while that's certainly a sympathetic situation, it seems that Clark's primary reaction to his circumstance is anger. Even in the role play with Mary pretending to be Barbara, he can't help but lash out, blaming Barbara for his current situation, the fact that he hasn't been able to live out his dreams. One of the key points of Clark's character is that he feels stuck. As he'll say later, it's a sort of loop. He wants things to go right, but they stay wrong. He tries something else to make things go right, and he finds himself back in the same place. From what we see of the furniture store, business is not good. For sale and discount signs hang up everywhere, and bills pile up his office. At one point, he tells his manager, Kat, that she can open the store, not realizing it's been open for a while. It's just no one's buying. It seems that a lot of Clark's turmoil spawns from his position, but is made worse by his reaction. His bitterness and anger continues to boil in on itself. And while for the most part he does a good job hiding it, we'll see where that goes. In contrast, Mary seems to be a sort of foil. As we'll learn throughout the film, she grew up with an agoraphobic mother who had some sort of mental condition that kept her, and therefore her daughter, from venturing outside. Since we don't know how capable Mary's mother was to take care of herself, from what we see in the film, probably not a lot. But because of her mother's mental condition, it's hard to assign blame to her mother, even though Mary's upbringing was certainly her fault. Because of that, they both have problems, but one of them assigns it to others around them, while the other more so assigns it to the self. It's something that they keep locked up and simply use as a directive for where they go forward. I mean, it's not hard to see. Mary grew up with a mentally ill mother, and now she works as a therapist. Because of that, Mary has an outlet for the things that happen to her. She has trauma, sure, but she's directing it in a way that she thinks she can use it to help others. Her experiences can matter. Whereas Clark's problems have an outlet as well, but instead of help, it's lashing out. Both of them have sympathetic roots, but they've expressed those roots in opposite directions. It's also funny that both of them are using television ads as kind of a final stage of these expressions, or at least for their current situation where they're at, where those expressions have got them. Because Mary uses a television ad to sell a self-help guide, trying to help people to better understand themselves, to open the window to their own mind. And we see that Clark is using television ads to dress as a half pirate, half sultan figure and sell furniture he doesn't care about. Because in the commercial that we can see him shooting with his two employees, Bobby and Kat, or at least Kat's his employee, Bobby may just be like her boyfriend who brought a camera. We can see that he puts on this pirate swashbuckling persona, but even the commercial doesn't go well. As he goes to sit on a throne at the end, the throne breaks. Even in this situation, when he has to denigrate himself, and the guy who wants to be an architect is acting like a goofy kid cereal mascot, even then it doesn't work out for him. The furniture throne is too unstable to hold him up. I also like the note that Bobby mentions that based on the name of the store, Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire, his character doesn't know what it wants to be. It's part sultan, part pirate captain. And even that speaks to Clark's character. He's confused. He's two people in one. He's the great architect who wants to start a family, and he's the angry guy who's stuck selling furniture. And because of this interpersonal dual role he has, the sides are eating each other. He's losing his family, he can't be an architect, and the furniture store isn't going well. We'll come to find out that there's an entryway or null zone into the complex in the basement of Clark's business. He begins to notice something is up because at night, something seems to be drawing a lot of power, characterized by a weird extra breaker that forms into the breaker box in the basement of his store. This creates a new, more physical connection between the complex and the real world that I'll talk about more later. There's a part where we hear Mary talking about opening the window to the mind, not simply being a viewer or a passenger in your life, but stepping through it and taking charge of your life. This is contrasted by footage we see of both Clark and Mary. Primarily Clark, who, as Mary is talking about not simply viewing your life or letting it happen, but doing something with it, we see Clark drinking, driving up to his house that his wife kicked him out of. And as he parks across the street, he is literally viewing his life through a window as he's watching his wife go to bed by herself. Rather than doing something to change his situation, he is simply reveling in this cycle. Mary's not immune to this either, as will become more apparent later in the film. She has some serious issues when it came to her mother and her upbringing. And while she's at what seems to be a house party, she sees a mother and daughter, and that causes her some distress. Enough that she has to step away and take medicine. She's certainly doing better than Clark, but the memories of what once was are certainly still burdening her. Well, one night while Clark's in the store, the power fritzes out again, and this is what leads him to the complex entrance. And all of the team's effects are on full display here, from the entrance to the complex being a hole in the wall, something you simply pass through, like what we saw in the web series and Found Footage 2, to how good the practical set of the Backrooms looks with someone walking through them. I'll never get over the strangeness of these spaces, and especially with the way Kane shoots it, how well the liminal details come through the screen. But something else I want to highlight that's done really well here that I haven't seen a ton of people point out is how Kane's cinematography speaks languages through the way shots are composed. For example, Kane likes his dead space. And no, not like the video game. He may like that too. I don't know. No, Kane will often orchestrate his shots to contain much more of the setting around the subject than the subjects themselves. It's not impossible for him to have some waist up or personal shots, but most of the time, when he can, the subjects are just a small part of the world they inhabit. I think that's fitting considering a lot of Kane's work, at least online, is based around spaces in one way or the other. If it's an abandoned shopping mall from the oldest view, if it's obviously the Backrooms from the Backrooms, or even the large planes that we see created in the digital space if people still live here. Which, side note about the Rolling Giant, when Mary's home is being demolished, you can see it's because an apartment complex is coming into the region that is named after Riverton, which is Julian Riverton, the botanist of which the Rolling Giant was built, of which Kane's series is based on. Which I think is really cool because, you know, the whole theme at the bottom of the Rolling Giant is forgotten people and forgotten memories and how legacies are lost. Now this botanist has gone all the way to having something named after him in one of the biggest movies of the year, if not the biggest movie of the year. I think that's pretty cool. But speaking of Kane's shot style, especially for outdoor areas, it's like the space overwhelms the subject. Sometimes the shot itself is about the space, like example when we see an outside shot of a building where just a corner of it comes into the middle of the frame, and then the other 3/4 of the frame are just sky. Or when Clark's in his furniture store and we see Clark in the bottom of the image and then the other 3/4 of the screen is just the store itself. A lot of Kane's composition isn't so much about people in spaces as it is spaces with people in them. And because that's the language he speaks for the majority of the runtime, it's very intentional when this changes. And the first big example we see of that change is when Clark first enters the complex. This isn't to say there are 0 shots of the Backrooms or 0 shots of Clark being more minuscule in their presence. There certainly are. But there's an overwhelming number of shots here where Clark takes up the majority of the frame, either with the camera at a fixed distance behind him as he moves forward, or in something that happens a lot with this first expedition, the camera in front of Clark as Clark is stepping towards it. It's like, despite what the rest of film is telling us about these places being so important, it's like here, the cinematography wants us to know that Clark matters, that Clark is pushing towards us. Despite how imposing this environment is, he is imposing in the midst of it. And I think that silent language works very well for where we see Clark's arc wrap up. Clark walks through the yellow hallways that we've all come to know and love. As he first steps into the complex, there's a ton of furniture piled up just on the other side of the threshold. And that makes sense to me because we know on the reality side of the threshold, there's a furniture store. So the complex, seemingly copying stuff in the world around it, just copied a bunch of furniture. There's a lot of stuff we see in Clark's initial expedition that confirms some of the theories that I had when the trailer came out. Which, to clarify, I made that last video about the Backrooms before I went to the premiere, so my only knowledge was the stuff I saw on set that day. So I knew a few things, like the pirate was going to show up, but I didn't know, like, plot or, like, lore implications or stuff like that, besides whatever the pirate means. But things like async putting out the cardboard cutouts and then playing the golden record as a way to make first contact with whatever's in the complex. And as Clark goes into the room where we see the camera that async set up from the trailer, in the corner in a hidden space, he finds a duffel bag. This is the same duffel bag that Naren had in the opening found footage segment. And when Clark opens it, it's seemingly full of data. Tapes, recordings, and Naren's ID badge. Among the recordings are a bunch of names, one of which includes Ivan Beck. Oh, man, when I saw that in the theater, still the puppet master, still the man behind the scenes somewhere. There's also sequences in the film where like you see wind chimes or you can hear wind chimes. And every time there's an Easter egg like that, of course, I was losing my mind. From here, Clark crawls through a crawl space and ends up in a room that seems representative of the moment he was filming the commercial. There's 2 pairs of shoes on the ground, which match Kat's and Bobby's. And in the middle of the room is a representation of the throne Clark was sitting on. It seems to be frozen in the moment that the chair broke. In my last video, I theorized that perhaps the complex is taking these real-world spaces and simply copying them, but the copies are off. That seems confirmed in the movie, but furthermore, it seems here that not only does it copy spaces, it copies them at different points in time. As indicated by imagery in the trailer, as you go down, it progresses further and further. The lack of detail can be the result of generational loss, that as things are copied over and over, they lose more and more detail. But in instances we'll see later, it seems that the complex also copies different spaces in time. So it seems here that it copied the moment the commercial was shot. Now, while Kat's and Bobby's shoes look normal, comparatively, other than the fact they're half in the floor, Clark's throne looks way, way larger. There's also in the room a pit, and the pit is just full of wooden chairs. And I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if the implication is something put the chairs in there, or the complex just made the chair pit, or what. I'm doing my best. Anyway, Clark hears something loud behind him, something that destroys the caveman cutout and makes a run for it. When Clark gets out, sure, part of him is terrified by what he's seen, but the biggest part of him is fascinated. He has no idea what he just discovered, but for someone who wants to be an architect, this is incredible. The shapes, the spaces, how would this place even be built? So the first thing he does is take the information to his therapist, Mary, who of course does not believe him. Clark's working theory is that perhaps this is some kind of subway system or government project off the books. He thinks maybe the entrance is hidden that way because they're using mirrors or something. But whatever it is, he's going to find out more information on it, and since Mary doesn't believe him, he's going to get proof. So he goes back to Kat and Bobby and has them bring a camera, which leads us to the next found footage segment. I love the whole segment with the 3 of them working through the complex. I think not only is a great callback to the series, but it's just creepy. Found footage is always fun because it puts you in the driver's seat. Like, I understand some people use it just so they can get away with less effects or quieter moments, but to me it's always effective, especially in moments of tension, to be able to remove the barrier the audience has of witnessing things happening to characters and instead be one of the characters who the tears are incurring in front of. So despite Clark's obsession, regardless if it's safe or not, he brings Kat and Bobby into the complex with him. Packs supplies, and he seems almost giddy about the opportunity to go find more of this place, shirking the dangers that they might find in there. Clark knows from the first time he was there's something big, something that can shatter the entire cardboard poster in a single swing. Of course, that doesn't matter to him because what matters to him is proving he's right. And in a greater sense, finding some purpose, something new in this discovery. And yes, as soon as they start walking around in the found footage segment, Bobby records a bunch of the Splendor Suns all over the wall and floors. Yes, I see them. What do you want me to do about them? I don't know. I don't know what to do. The number of people who send me emails every week, like, oh, maybe the sun means this, maybe the sun means that. I know it could mean a ton of things, but Kane hasn't said anything about it. So until he says something further about it or does something more with them, it's all speculation. It could mean God. It could mean joy. It could mean infinity. It could just be the sun. It could just be a hot ball of gas in the sky. I have no idea, but yeah, the stupid sun is there. I see it. Thank you. That sounded like I was being harsh to people who inform me their theories about the sun. That's fine. I appreciate you. I was being harsh to Kane for putting not just one sun, but like a trillion in this stupid movie. You know what? 0 out of 5 stars. I hate it. Go home. Don't watch it. Eventually, the three come to a point with a steep incline. It looks like a position where a staircase should be, but the complex forgot to add the stairs in, so it's just a ramp. Bobby goes down while tied to a rope, and we see what is effectively a nest. It's a regular complex hallway, but the entire structure has been tilted on its side. Around the room are these huge piles of clothes. Mixes of dresses, t-shirts, coats, socks. Bobby walks up to one of the piles and lifts up an End Apartheid t-shirt. This is significant because this is the same shirt Bobby was wearing when they were shooting the commercial. In my previous video, I theorized that still lives, of which we only see one for sure in the web series, I theorized that still lives are the complex's attempt to make people. That every now and then they don't just print spaces, they print the people that inhabit them. And if we saw a space earlier where the moment that they recorded the commercial was copied, so if I'm right about that and we saw where the complex already copied the moment they made the commercial, then the t-shirt being down here makes sense because that means the complex potentially made a still life copy of Bobby. Similar to the spaces, a vague outline or idea of what a human should be, but not the right details. Well, that of course begs the question, where are they? I mean, as a matter of fact, where is any of them? If this place is copying spaces, then most spaces in the world have people in or around them. So all these places should be full of still life copies of people walking around. Why down here is it only their clothes? This is also something we saw throughout the web series, like in front of the blue house in Found Footage 3, there's a ton of clothes and what appears to be bloodstains dragged around the area. If there are still lives down here, what's happening to them? Well, Bobby moves forward a bit and sees something monstrous down a dark hallway. A lot of people on their first viewing who were familiar with the web series probably thought this was a life form. But as we know now, it's the same thing that killed Naren in the beginning of the movie and the same thing that will show up later. Bobby runs from it, doesn't take the rope off of his waist, it drags him down, and after it drags him down, the bed he was tied to knocks down Kat and Clark. We see what's left of Bobby get dragged through a door on the ground, and then Kat runs away before screaming. So we're left with Clark, who picks up the camera and makes a run for it. And it's here that we come across a lot of things that are very reminiscent of the OG YouTube series. Different spaces that look similar to houses, converting into areas that look similar to a hotel or a storefront. Clark goes through closets that open up into buildings. He squeezes through passageways that open up into tiled rooms. There's a few very important things he comes across. For one, he comes across a large pile of clothes, which looks like the nest he was just in, supposedly caused by whatever was chasing them. And one of the outfits on the ground is an async uniform. Perhaps, since we later know that the thing that's chasing them is the same thing that killed Naren, this is Naren's uniform after he was made to not be alive anymore. Also, when he gets to that pile of clothes, there's a speaker on the wall, just like in Found Footage 3, and just like in Found Footage 3, it's playing Still Life, the eerie droning track from Kane's web series, which, similar to seeing the async logo at the beginning of the movie, hearing Still Life in the theater had me so excited. I don't care how anyone else felt about the movie. This was for me. Clark also, for half a second, comes across what looks like his crutch and his pirate hat from the costume he was using to shoot the commercial. And if you haven't seen the movie, you may hear that and think, oh, well, that's probably from Clark's Still Life, right? Just like how the t-shirt was from Bobby's. But spoilers, we see Clark's Still Life later in the film, and that's the thing that's chasing them right now. And it is much, much larger than Clark. But the stuff we see on the ground here looks like it's Clark. So maybe it's just the items getting copied over again. Or maybe... Okay, I'll see. Theory time later. Anyway, this... He always does... Like the sun, he always puts stupid things there to haunt me. And when I think it was my second viewing, I saw the hat and the crutch, and I just got mad. It's like, okay, well, what? I thought I knew what was happening, but what's that about? I don't know. Clark eventually comes to a room that is lit by a Christmas tree. And around the tree are several people who it seems are made out of the ground, similar to the one seen in Found Footage 3. I theorized then that perhaps these are still lifes forming. You know, they kind of grow out of the ground before they take their full shape, similar to how Bobby's and Kat's shoes were still halfway in the ground. And that could still be the case, or it could simply be whatever snapshot or memory the complex took, it simply remembered that people were there, but in a very nondescript way. So people who it has full memories of, or if it's tracking these memories off of people's memories themselves, like it's using your mind to copy things, Maybe the complex recreates you or figures who were important to you in that moment, but other people who were just kind of there fill the noise by being a part of the structure itself. Less a still life, more so just a shape in the ground. Either way, Clark comes to the room with the Christmas tree, and we get our first good look at still lifes that we've ever had across Kane's work. We see one sitting in a wheelchair, clicking a light, its face distorted. And then another one, a redhead girl in a suit, begins to stumble towards Clark. We'll get a better look at both of these later, but for now, this is the most we've ever seen of a still life. I mean, before the movie, the most we saw was that glimpse of one running towards the cameraman from Found Footage 3. And this is on full display. There's no mistaking now that this is a person, or at least the complex trying to show a person. Clark makes a run for it. He runs through a bunch of different cool spaces, eventually winding up at a pool room. Pool room where instead of water, there's just more carpet in the pool. He sets the camera down because he hears Kat screaming. And it seems that Kat's on the other side of a one-way window, where on her side she can see Clark, but on Clark's side it just looks like a tile wall. Well, as Clark is talking to her, whatever's chasing them picks up Clark's camera for some reason and points it towards Clark before the segment ends. I do have to say, when it comes to themes and, wrapping up character moments and stuff like that, I feel like the dinner scene that comes later is stronger. But when it comes to just experiencing the Backrooms and, just the visual, the terror of it, what we see, I'd say this found footage run by Clark's probably my favorite segment in the movie. It just hits so many notes of what I think makes the Backrooms cool, that any space could appear anywhere. Between the Christmas room and the piles of clothes, there's just so many good creepy elements. At one point, when we saw that Async was reviewing the security footage from Clark's first expedition, we see that an Async researcher, who will later learn his name Phil, saw the footage, and then we get a shot of Phil watching television with his family when Captain Clark's commercial plays. So Phil puts two and two together and figures out where the breach is, how this guy managed to just wind up in the complex. We also see a framed newspaper clipping at Phil's house that Async got a huge grant from the government. But, as we know from the web series, that should be no surprise. Now, we're never told explicitly how long Clark is in the complex, but it's seemingly a while. If I had to guess, probably around a month. At some point, somehow, he gets a call out to Mary. Maybe he left the complex and went back to his store to make the call and then went back into the complex. I don't know. But at some point, he gets a phone call out to Mary and simply says that he opened the window. Based off Mary's therapy, this is to say he's found a way to change his life for the better, to be a part of it. Well, after Clark doesn't show up to therapy sessions for a while, Mary decides to go to his store. Further leaning into the idea that he's been gone for some time, there's a ton of notices and bills piled up underneath the front door. When Clark had tried to tell Mary about the Backrooms the first time, he said that the entrance was in the basement of his store. So Mary goes down to the basement and sees the taped outline and the light shining on the wall and sees a fly buzzing around that passes through the door. Which I actually believe this effect started because there was a fly on set they couldn't get rid of, and they just worked it into the plot. And obviously, as you can imagine, Mary is very overwhelmed by everything she sees. And that thing I said earlier about because of the way Kane shoots spaces, Clark stands out so much in his first expedition because of how he's framed, I think that's on full display comparing Clark's first voyage to Mary's. Because when we see Mary's, it is way different. Most of the camera positions are in far off corners. She is a speck compared to the space around her. As opposed to Clark's that had almost horror movie framing, treating him as the monster getting closer to the screen. With Mary, it's more like Alice in Wonderland. It's just someone voyaging, awestruck through these impossible places. There's also some things that change when Mary goes into the complex. For example, all the furniture that was right on the other side of the threshold is now gone. And we later see that all of that has been pushed up against the door that seemingly Async is running their camera through. It seems that Clark piled all the furniture here because he didn't want Async interfering. Also, in a blink and you'll miss it moment, when we get the shot from within the dark hallway behind the stop sign pointing towards Mary, if you look in the bottom left corner, there's a dismembered hand. Now, is this because the entity that was chasing Clark put the hand there? Did Clark put it here as some kind of morbid breadcrumb? Who knows? Eventually, Mary comes to a space where a ton of chairs have been piled up, almost to make a sort of shelter. And when Mary goes beyond that shelter, she sees what Clark has written on the wall. It's a giant mural of what we'll learn in a minute is Clark's still life, with several notes that Clark has written about his time here around it. There's a few things here I want to point out from Clark's mural. For one, at the top of the mural, we have an open window. This relates to Clark now believing he's found his purpose, he's taken control of his life and stepped through it. We have his still life tossing an async researcher into the air. This probably means that after Phil figured out that Clark was in the complex and supposedly at a sort of peace with his still life, the still life killed a bunch of async researchers as async tried to go in and remove Clark, which is probably why Clark barricaded the door. And his still life probably killed a bunch of async members. There's some stuff on the wall that I can't really make sense of yet. Like to the bottom left, there's what looks like a calendar, but the things above it don't correlate to like days of the week. Like what day of the week starts with an R or a B. There's what kind of looks like a North Star sort of compass with 436 written next to it. It might be 436 degrees. So maybe he's implying that like spatial geometry exceeds 360 degrees. The word facile is written next to an async uniform. Maybe he's saying that the async researchers are fake, or maybe that they're imposters and shouldn't be trusted. He also has the word unrealized written in big letters underneath a depiction of what looks like someone in a house and then a city above it, which maybe he came across like the red city that we've seen in the series. But there are some things that I think we can make sense of. Like, for example, he wrote, "Why thinking in terms of magic? Be realistic. Here and now is a two-way street." And then he has an arrow drawn to whatever this is coming off of the throne of the still life. By why thinking in terms of magic, be realistic, he's probably talking about spaces, or that this space has to come off of something. And then with the here and now is a two-way street, he's probably talking about the reality of the complex versus the reality of our reality. That there is some correlation between the things here and what's seen above. He also wrote, "The floor plan changed again. Roof is wrong. Roof is wrong. I don't know who signed the plans, but the handwriting looks like mine." Now, if this is copying plans from the real world, maybe he's talking about a space that was similar to the furniture store, which, yeah, if it was a one-for-one copy, it would have his handwriting on it. Or if these are plans for, like, the space itself, and if the complex is copying off of people's minds, similar to how I believe it did with Ivan Beck, rather than just real places, then maybe it's leaning into his dreams of being an architect. Maybe some of these spaces are ones he simply imagined. We also see the thing that's been applied a few times of like generative differences between instances of the complex. Like there's a house with a 1, 2, 3 and like following numbers drawn on it. But with each generation, the house changes and gets smaller, more obscured. So as the complex continues to remember something, it becomes more and more lost. There's also one thing that says tables don't bleed with an arrow drawn towards a guy half in the ground. So maybe that's implying there was like a still life coming out of a table, and then when Clark cut into it, because the table and the still life were fused together, the table itself bled. Which what we see from Clark's still life later, still lives can definitely bleed at least sometimes. But also some of the details here, while I feel like there's certainly Easter eggs and we're supposed to notice it, I also feel like, Clark's kind of losing his mind a bit. So some of it may be his misunderstanding. Some of it may be his, artistic license for depicting the things he's seen. Anyway, as you can imagine, Mary is terrified by all of this and then realizes that Clark's standing right behind her. When Mary asks what this place is, Clark says, "It's everything." So it seems Clark has started to put together the nature of the complex, that it's just the real world copied and copied for some reason. Well, while they're standing there, they hear something large coming, and Mary asks what it is, and Clark says it's him. And as we know now, he means his still life. Clark then chokes out Mary. He knocks her out so that he can take her somewhere else, somewhere she probably won't go willingly. As Mary's passed out, we see another flashback. It seems that Mary's mother, because of her condition, was eventually committed. And again, we can see how this affected her life and drove her in the career path she eventually chose. Also, because I mentioned it in the last video, I said that there are some similarities between Kane's work in the nature of the complex and the Caretakers Everywhere at the End of Time album. And sure enough, we hear music from that album in this scene, which I'm considering that another thing I got right. Did I get it right, buddy? Did I do good? Thanks, man. Every now and then I'll be I'll be recording and I'll look over at the preview image with just all of the... Does he not look so sad? Like, look at that expression. He looks like in the pits of despair. We also see during this sequence that the house Mary grew up in, that she associates so much of her trauma with, we see that within the complex, this house is copied over and over and over. And again, with each iteration, it loses detail, becoming something different. Stuck in the same place, but becoming worse each time. This contrasts perfectly with what Clark is saying when Mary wakes. Clark is speaking Mary's own words back to her, talking about how the human mind has a habit of building loops for itself. He talks about how the human mind creates these loops for itself, these cycles that it repeats again and again, rather than simply stepping out of or opening the window. This phrasing works really well for kind of the analysis of the character of the complex we'll talk about later. But when Mary awakes, she is tied to a chair at a dinner table in what seems to be a complex's rendition of a house. And at the table with her is Clark and a still life. This is far and away, through any of Kane's stuff, the best look we get at still life. It's a guy sitting at the chair, but the shirt's wrong, the collar is copied, and most notably, his facial features are completely butchered. He has too many sets of eyes, he has too many noses, too many folds on his face. Behind Clark is another still life, this one seeming to have multiple faces folding in on themselves. Similar to how the complex copies spaces, it copies people in the same way. It remembers some details, but it doesn't know where to fill in the blanks with the rest. Sometimes just reinserting the details it knows, like the eyes or the lips. Just as the complex is smeared copies of real spaces, still life are smeared copies of real people. Clark seems to have figured it out and explains to Mary that somewhere out there in the real world, there's probably a guy that looks kind of like that with that shirt, or a guy sitting in a wheelchair with a lamp nearby, and the complex just kind of meshed those details together and made them here. The only one he doesn't go into specifics on is the woman behind him in a red suit. Instead, he just kind of looks at her forlornly. Now, most people have pointed out that earlier, when Clark looks at a picture of him and his wife by the bed he's sleeping in the furniture store, that this still life is likely the still life of his wife, Barbara. And this is possible. From what we know of the complex, it seems to copy spaces that are near its counterpart in the real world. So since Clark went in at the furniture store, we can assume that his house wasn't that far away. So it's not impossible that Barbara's still life was wandering nearby. As a matter of fact, this is the still life that was walking towards him in the Christmas tree room during the found footage segment earlier. It also explains why he simply looks at her. He doesn't go into detail describing her. Clark is a fascinating character because, yes, he has problems. And yes, those problems have been really amplified by his time in the complex. Complexified, if you will. Haha. But I don't think, like is the case with a lot of horror movies or thrillers or whatever you want to call this, there isn't a point where he completely loses his humanity. I've seen people theorize based on the way Barbara's still life was holding her head when she first approached Clark, or with what he does to the still life in a minute, that potentially Clark might have been physically abusive, like during the fight he had that caused Barbara to kick him out. Like maybe he threw a bottle at her head or something, for example. But things like that are not known for sure. For all that we know, he's just an angry guy who can't control his emotions. But with little moments, we still see him trying to chase this idealized version of himself. Like, for example, during an earlier scene, we see Clark sitting in his store scribbling architect designs. He still wants to be an architect. He still thinks about it. He has dreams and ambitions. And here in the complex, as strange as it is, he has wheeled, quite literally with the one in the wheelchair, he has wheeled or pushed in a bunch of still lifes into this room to have a sort of pseudo family. And the way he looks at Barbara's still life is almost with a sense of longing, as if he misses her. I'm not using this to excuse any actions of Clark's behavior or what he may or may not have done. But you still see that person in there, that person he wants to be, he just doesn't know how to make it. Clark, while presenting the still life, says that they can't feel pain and demonstrates this by plunging a knife into one of the still life's necks, whatever. Then shortly after this, says that you can eat them. He opens up the shirt and digs into the still life, pulling out what looks like a white styrofoam. Now, like I said, we're going to see in a minute that still lifes can bleed, but this one clearly doesn't. Maybe it's something to do with the level of detail the still lifes receive, that if someone like Clark is near a threshold, it's more thought out, more detailed. And we know that there are still lives in the YouTube series that can bleed, because if the clothes on the ground and the blood drag marks everywhere are from still lives, then those are at least some that did bleed as well. But this one doesn't. Inside of him is like the idea of flesh, as if you knew someone and your brain got copied into the complex. The person you're thinking of, you probably haven't seen their, internal organs and fleshy parts. So when the complex copies your memory, it doesn't know what to fill in with there, so it just puts the idea of something to fill in there, like a stuffing. So we see how Clark has been living for this long. He's just been eating these things. And also he goes to the fridge and gets a cup of milk. So maybe if there's areas in the complex that copy, say, a grocery store, similar to the meat inside of the still life, it puts like the idea of food in there. So perhaps that's where he got the milk from. Or maybe the fridge already had the milk in it because, fridges often have milk. So that's what the complex knew to put. Also, when he goes to get the cup of milk out of the fridge, we see in the bottom of the fridge, Kat's head. Now, a lot of people have said, oh my gosh, I can't believe Clark killed and ate Kat, which I don't think is what happened. I think more than likely what happened, as we've seen it do a couple times at this point, Clark still life killed Kat and ate a lot of her, potentially leaving a hand, if that was the hand that was left up by the threshold when we saw Mary walking through earlier. And maybe Clark in this delusional state was like, oh, well, here's her head. I should probably not let this decompose, so he just put it in the fridge. Mary's, of course, horrified by seeing this, but Clark says he tried to help her, but he just couldn't get through to her. Mary is obviously freaked out by all this and asks for Clark to let her go, and then Clark says first he wants her to apologize and say he was right. Mary initially thinks Clark is talking about the Backrooms. Remember, he came to her, said they were real, and she didn't believe him, so she's like, of course, yeah, you were right about all of this. That's not what Clark's talking about. Clark's talking about the role play scenario he does with Mary, where Mary pretends to be Barbara. Even here, in this impossible space, in this never-ending sea of human places and thoughts reprinted over and over, he is still bitter about what happened with his wife. So he says they're going to do this role play exercise again. He says that he's tried doing it with what we can assume to be Barbara's still life, but it doesn't go anywhere because, the still lifes don't communicate. So he walks over to Barbara's and scalps her and then places the red-headed scalp on Mary. With those elements, I love how bizarre this scene is. I mean, it's a guy who is mad about what happened with his wife, and he's talking to his therapist, just like at the beginning of the film, but now they're in like this dimensional shift zone underneath the earth, and there's a photocopy of his wife who he cut the top of the head off of and put it on his therapist, and there's like, he's implying that they should eat the flesh of one of these things. It's also weird in the best way. They do the exercise again. Clark remarks the same things, only with more passion this time, saying it's his house. He can get drunk if he wants. He can come home when he wants. He accuses Barbara of being the reason he can't get anywhere in life. But eventually, Mary has enough of this and just calls Clark out. She says that Clark's biggest problem is that nothing is ever his fault. He wasn't able to be an architect, so he blames his wife. He's stuck doing this job, and it's society's fault. As mentioned earlier, Clark has a lot of problems that are hard to deal with, but the solution isn't to revel in that. Mary calls him out for simply whining about what is rather than changing things, and says most of the problems in his life are his fault, or at least the fact that he's stuck in them. I've seen some people say that like Mary's a horrible therapist because of that. It's like, oh, what kind of therapist just says it's your fault? Get over it. I feel like Mary is in a bit of a unique situation. Her client has her tied to a chair, holding a knife, trying to get her to role play his wife so he can yell at her and get his emotions out. And she has no idea where she is or if he's going to kill her or something else is going to kill her. So yeah, I think Mary just kind of like, cutting through the fat and getting to the meat of the conversation is okay. Then Clark asks how he can change, and Mary says she has no idea. She then remarks that she can't save anyone, which calls back to her arc, where most of what she's trying to do, especially with this career, is to help people because of her mother, who she was unable to help. But when Mary tells Clark this, that it's his fault and this is just how he is, it's just the way he's wired, Clark almost finds comfort in this. Clark's been a man who has been so tormented by his position, convinced that it's everyone else's fault, that the world just keeps kicking him down. But then when hearing that this is simply how he is, that's almost a peace for him. Clark says he doesn't want to change, and Mary says you don't have to, you can stay right where you are. Before Clark remarks, I don't think I want to change. I like it in here. For the first time, I feel like I'm where I belong. To me, this line Clark says is the most important line of the film, at least thematically. See, the first time I watched the movie, my only real complaint with it is I wanted to see more of Clark. I totally got what the film was doing with, we see him in the complex, and then it seems like he's about to die when something picks up the camera. And then we cut to like a month later and he's completely lost it. But I wanted to see more of that transition. I wanted to see more of him growing at peace with the Backrooms. I wanted to see more of why this was such a solution for him, why this space gave him a comfort he couldn't find anywhere else. But honestly, after watching the movie a few times and thinking about it, I really think this is perfect. Everything that can be said about Clark's character has been said in different ways before this. He wants to be an architect. He imagines building these grand, impossible spaces. If we look at the sketches he drew in his notebook, he has ideas for these strange-shaped buildings and things that can put him on the map. And now he's been dropped into the most impossible structure he could ever imagine. And he's the pioneer of it. He's the Clark of the Lewis and Clark. He gets to explore it forever if he wants to. He can stay right where he is because he likes it here. He feels like it's something he can do that matters. But in a greater sense, in a thematic sense, the Backrooms is this concept of staying in the same place, of looping through times that have passed over and over and over, personified. It takes things that was and just recreates them, getting worse every time it does, just like Clark has been in the cycle of his life, getting more and more bitter as he passes through the loop again and again. When he says he wants to stay right where he is, he's referring to both his position as a person and his position within the complex because the two are so intertwined. So when he says, I feel like I'm right where I belong, it cuts so deep. All of the things I believed on the first watch through to be missing character development, to be this missing period of time where he realizes the space he's in and he decides that he doesn't want to change, that he likes it here, all of that is explained in that one sentence. And honestly, I feel like it wouldn't be as satisfying if Chadwell wasn't such a great actor. The way he presents this anger throughout the film, the way he's so vitriolic, but in this moment, he shows a genuine emotion of sympathy, of mourning for himself, and a peace that he doesn't have to fight it. That this war he's been at with himself, that it's everyone else's problem, and if I can just get rid of them, or if I can be better than them, then maybe I can change, but the world has it out against me. This moment of solace, that he's just like this, and he can be okay with that. It's like it puts his soul to rest. So with this piece, he decides to let Mary go. He goes over to her and begins to cut her bindings from the table before the personification of his position walks in the room. So, of course, Clark's still life is the captain. It's the image that he was dressed as when he shot the commercial that we saw the moment from copied earlier. Before the captain even enters the room, the still life of Barbara freaks out, tries to run away, pressing itself into the corner, trying to get away from the captain. If the complex takes places and it only captures fragments of them, like if it was to copy a kitchen, it may have a table and a stove, but otherwise it's an empty room. It just remembers the highlights. So if Clark's still life is just the highlights of him, it's the image that he portrays himself to the world, the Sultan pirate thing from the TV ads, and the pieces of its mind it took were anger and vitriol. The captain was responsible for the deaths of Bobby, Kat, Naren that we saw in the opening found footage segment, and potentially way more async researchers and way more still life if Clark's drawing of the captain killing async researchers and all of the still life clothes that were down in the den are anything to indicate. That explains what happened to Bobby and Kat still life. The captain probably killed them, or if they're not really alive, deleted them, ate them, whatever. The captain is also huge. There's a few reasons for that. Perhaps it's because since Clark was portraying himself as a character and was going to put himself on TV, quite literally the idea of him was larger than life or larger than he really was, then that's what the complex copied. Or perhaps because of Clark's nearness to the threshold and the fact he would spend, all day and night there since he also slept there, it just gathered more and more data about him compared to people who were further away from entrances or null zones. Remember how earlier I said in Clark's found footage segment you can see the crutch and pirate hat he used in the ads? Well, maybe the original Captain Clark still life was pretty true to form and, was like regular human sized, but as Clark got closer and closer to the complex, as maybe he ventured in and out of it, which I don't think the timelines match up on that one, but you get it. Proximity to the complex, maybe that caused his still life to transform. It grew larger. The hat needed to be bigger. It replaced the fake crutch that he was using as a peg leg for an actual peg leg. Maybe the idea of Captain Clark became bigger than what Clark actually was. So the Captain is a manifestation of all of Clark's worst traits. It's his anger, it's his brutality, but for some reason, Clark's been able to coexist with it. As we saw when the Captain destroyed the cardboard caveman cutout and killed Bobby, this thing is super violent. But for some reason, Clark has been able to interact with it in peace for however long he's been down here. But now, something's different. Whenever the Captain walks into the house, Clark says, "What are you doing in here?" implying the Captain's never done that before. For some reason, Clark's relationship with the Captain has changed. So when Clark walks up to the Captain and the Captain picks it up, Clark says, "We don't have to change." As our therapist, as Clark refers to Mary, said, "It's just the way we're wired." And with this, the Captain looks at Clark and then begins to eat him, biting into his shoulder, ripping out a chunk of flesh, and then beating him to death on the table and ground. When I saw this for the first time, my immediate thought was, perfect. And it works for me for a couple different reasons. Firstly, the thematic reasoning. Clark has been trapped over and over in these cycles of life. Again, just like the complex, it's reproducing what was over and over again and getting worse at it each time. Every time Clark stays in this position with a job he doesn't care about and a failing marriage, he just gets more bitter. Sure, some people go their entire life that way, but it's a poison that will eventually kill you. Obviously, Clark can do what he wants. Like Mary said, stay here. I don't care. The people who resign to stay their life that way, to just live in the agony and blame others and never change, it eats away at them. And living with hate, deciding to just fester in it for that long, will eventually kill you. The Captain is all of that bitterness made manifest, made flesh, or pseudo-flesh. So quite fittingly, Clark's worst parts kill him in the end. He may have resigned to live like that, but that's no way to live. And as a matter of fact, you can't. And it also works for me literally, because like I said, the Captain was hyper-violent. Any form of life, even still life it came across, it seemingly killed. But for some reason, it didn't hurt Clark. And I think it's because up until this point, Clark and the Captain were indistinguishable. Think about it this way. The Captain is a manifestation of Clark's worst traits, this bitterness and this constant desire to be more, but the inability or the lack of want to really change to do so. And so much of the complex represents stagnation. It is a place frozen in time forever as it is, never changing. If it does change, it creates a new iteration. What was is what will always be. So the Captain was the worst parts of Clark in a position that it would never recover. It will forever be that version of Clark that is angry, that is mad in the world, and looking to lash out at someone. And up until now, that's what Clark was. Clark was angry, he was bitter, so for all intents and purposes, the Captain and Clark were still mirrors of each other. I mean, like he wrote on the wall, here and now is a two-way street. So tragically, when Mary talks to Clark and for the first time he gets peace, when he makes a decision, even if it's a decision to not change, suddenly he is different. He is no longer the image of the Captain, and the Captain is an image of him. Clark is now a new person. And if you think of the complex as a living organism, then the Captain is a sort of antibody. It's an immune system that up until this point did not recognize Clark as anything different from itself. But now, with a changed Clark, one that's found some inner peace, its alert switches on. It now recognizes Clark as a different body within the whole and does what it does to every other body. Consumes it. Clark, with his resolution to not be different, to wallow in this grief and in this misery, even finding peace with the idea he doesn't have to get better, that route was only terminal, and it was his own bitterness that killed him in the end. Well, from here, of course, Mary is panicked and tries to get away. She runs out the door, finding herself on a complex recreation of a suburban street. Which also, the way, like, there's a whole video of Kane talking about how they shot this. It's so cool. They went to an actual street and put these blimps up in the air that had lights cast down, and then they shot the whole scene on an actual street, and then they went into Blender and did, like, the high ceilings, made it look like it was somewhere within the Backrooms. It's great. Anyway, the captain begins to chase Mary and chases her through several more set pieces. As Mary runs for it, she walks through a lot of different spaces that should be Easter eggs to those of you familiar with the web series. There's a green light glowing off to the side, like I theorized, potentially a place where the complex is deleting or creating space. She runs across a bunch of wind chimes, an Ivan Beck reference. There's also more pictures of the sun. I know, just moving on. She comes to this room full of couches, which, again, I know that, like, we get it, A24 did a lot to set up this movie, but that room is actually just a room full of couches. Here's a video of my wife and I, like, jumping across them. Actually, my wife was pregnant at the time, so me, my wife, and my child jumping across them. She gets through a door with the captain right behind her, only to find herself at the front of a giant drop-off. If we look at this drop-off, it looks like someone took a giant cookie cutter and just ripped all of the floors out of the complex. From what we've seen in imagery up until this point, as you go down, it's the same places reprinted over and over. Perhaps this is just the same photocopies done again and again. Perhaps this is the space at different times. But it looks like you can see where an area starts and then where it is just copied again and again and again, quite hauntingly, getting down to a place where it's only darkness. A lot of lore implications here, but from now she's running from the captain and there's a staircase that leads up. She pushes up through the staircase and finds herself in the basement of Clark's furniture store. When she tries to go through the exit, there's simply a wall there. Now, the most noticeable thing about this copy of the furniture store is it seems Async has placed a trap in the midst of it. So enough time has passed that Async saw Clark on the security camera, and then Phil saw the commercial for Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. So then they figured out that the still life that was walking around with Clark was Clark's still life, and then figured maybe that still life will come to the furniture store just like Clark, the real world counterpart. So they set up a caveman standee there, something that we know and Async knows the captain will destroy. So as the scene progresses and Mary is trying to get away from the captain, she hits the standee and that sets off a trap. There's these giant propellant systems in the room, similar to like a fire extinguisher, that shoots some kind of gas into the air. Whatever this is, it seems Async thinks this can incapacitate a still life, even one as strong as Clark's. So Async was trying to catch the captain, and here, as the captain's chasing Mary, she knocks over the standee and the trap goes off. However, this seems to be a two-way street, as it also nearly knocks out Mary. Right before Mary is about to get through the only exit she can, the captain tackles her to the ground, but it seems because of the gas is weaker than he was previously and can't just, like rip her in half. Throughout the film, Mary has carried a piece of pavement from her home that was demolished at the beginning of the film. And on that piece of pavement, her and her mother put their handprints in, seemingly a motif of when life was good, in spite of all of the wrong that happened to her by the raising her mother gave her. Well, she's carried that with her throughout the movie, and here, being attacked by the captain, she uses the piece of concrete to beat him. And here again, we see blood fly out of the captain, meaning at least some still lives can bleed, and the piece of concrete breaks across the captain's face, which, insert thing about Mary's previous trauma and the lesson she learned being used as a tool to get her through this situation, finding a correct way to cope with things that have happened to you versus ruminating in it and being killed. You get it. Mary starts to run through the narrow hallway to get away from the captain, and once she's at a safe space, she looks back at him, and to me, it feels like there's a sense of pity. Like, obviously, she's terrified by what's going on. She is, new to all of this. But something about the expression she gives him is almost remorse. It's like she knows that these still lives, according to Clark, are representations of people, and she knows that the captain is a representation of Clark. So she sees this anger coming out of this creature, and to me, I think she thinks of Clark, of someone she wishes she could have done something more for. It's subtle, and I think Renat does a great job at conveying this without it being melodramatic, like she doesn't break down in tears or anything. But it's just enough that I feel like she wishes she could have done more, staring now at the captain. Anyway, she pushes through the rest of the hallway, and a bunch of Async researchers are there, surely having been alerted by the alarm. As they stand around her, the gas takes its effect and knocks her out. From here, we see a series of x-rays that Async is taking. I think these are from Mary to analyze, if there's any contaminants in her or anything. I've seen other people say it's like the captain, which if that's the case, then it has like a fully formed skeletal system, which it might. Who knows? We see Mary get carried all the way to the KV-31 threshold that we're familiar with from the YouTube series. And I also have to add that once again, A24 built out like the whole threshold. Like, sure, there's a green screen to show the backrooms beyond it, but that whole entryway and the researchers standing around, that's all real. And again, really cool. From there, we see Mary being escorted by Async down these hallways, surely now inside of the Async building. Walking through the hallways, we see a few things, like Async has captured the captain, and they have him wrapped up, supposedly going to perform experiments on him. We also see a ton of cavemen lining a room for, all the traps or decoys Async sets out. And eventually Mary is taken to a sort of interrogation room. And who comes out to question her other than Phil? Phil is our stand-in in the film for just one of the Async scientists, and he explains Async's purpose to Mary. He says at one point Async was an MRI company. Obviously, with this discovery, not so much anymore. Assuming that this is real and this isn't just like their cover story for what they actually do, that makes a lot of sense. If you'll remember, the first entry to the complex was made due to low proximity magnetic distortion systems. And what is an MRI? A giant magnet. So it makes sense the company that already makes like these rotating magnetic models were the ones who had the technology and potentially accidentally discovered the complex. Or at least it was their tech that was used by Ivan Beck and his team to make entry to the complex. And this works in another layer as well, because MRIs are often used to monitor the brain or scan the brain. And if now, from what the movie seems to be telling us, the complex has more to do with people's memory of spaces as compared to how they actually are, then it makes sense that a company that uses magnets to scan the brain would be investigating this place where you use magnets to enter a space that is effectively copies of brain scans. Phil has some questions for Mary, trying to ask how she got into the complex, if she's seen Clark before, but Mary isn't interested in answering those. She's trying to understand what this place is, and Phil says they're trying to do the same, that this might be the greatest discovery in humanity's history, and they venture in and risk their lives just to understand it a little bit more. This really speaks to the thing I talked about in the last video, and something Kane brings up every time I talk to him about the series, that the complex really would be the great frontier of humanity. I mean, we discovered land, then we discovered the sea, then we discovered the moon. Imagine if we found this. Imagine the lives that we would be willing to lose if it meant finding that last frontier. And here it seems that Phil, as a representative for Async, is voicing some of those points. Mary, of course, asks the question, what's going to happen to me? Phil says he's not at liberty to say that, and it seems Mary begins to realize how bad of a situation she's in. I mean, we've seen it enough in the web series. Async cannot let the public know this place exists. It is top secret. Mary is just a civilian who had the misfortune of falling in, and then the misfortune on coming across the group of people tied to the government who really don't want this secret out. More than likely, Mary's going to get Peter tinched. They're going to hold her somewhere and then move her to an above ground facility. If we ever see Mary again, I don't know. I think if this is where her character ends, it makes sense. She had her arc with overcoming her own trauma, and then she is shown to be another victim of the complex and of Async's role in the complex. So if we never see her again, I think that's fine. Now, there's also potential that we will see her again in a series or a sequel. Maybe she is a prisoner at Async. Maybe Async works out some deal that she lives on site and works as a therapist. She just can't contact the outside world again. I think it's a coin flip as to if we're going to see her again, but I really think the final moments of the film really put a bow on the concept of the backrooms. We see a lot of backrooms counterparts of reality spaces we saw throughout the film. From the little community that Kat and Bobby lived in, from Mary's office to a shopping center. We see missing persons posters of Bobby and Kat, and we see the telephone pole they're on, and then again, seeing that generational loss, we see it copied again and again, getting worse in the true detail each time. And I think the final shot of the film is such a gut punch. We have that moment of Mary sitting in the interrogation room at Async, probably the scariest moment of her life, not knowing if she's going to be killed or held as a prisoner indefinitely. And we see her still life in that interrogation room, and when we cut to its face, we see how amalgamated her memory is. The hands growing out of each other, the face warped, repeated over and over. And it highlights one of the literal terrors of the complex really well. The idea that the worst moment of your life, the worst parts of your memories, the things you still fear, it's down there somewhere. It's amalgamated, it's alien, but you'll remember it when you see it. We saw the shot earlier where it showed the interior of Mary's house repeated again and again, and in this final montage, we see the remains of Mary's house. Even the destruction of it's copied down there, along with its true form. Everything that ever was is down there somewhere, and somewhere down there is you, trapped forever in that moment, never changing, only repeating the cycle of the worst parts of your life. And while Clark could have lived with that, up until his conversation Mary, he was content to stay right there in this cycle ad infinitum. But it's tragic that for Mary, someone who overcame that grief, someone who was able to push on and do something with it, doesn't matter to the complex. So all those memories, all those things that she used to be, is in there somewhere, deep beneath the earth. I think that this film does a great job at portraying what makes the Backrooms scary, what makes the concept interesting, and then it fuses that with the narrative that ties in so well. Last couple things to mention before I kind of talk about analysis of the film as a whole. As Mary is thinking on these things, as the audio is fading out, we can hear Phil saying that doors are opening everywhere and Async doesn't know how. But that goes in line with what we see in the series. Ever since they opened the main threshold, people are falling into null zones over and over. Again, the film takes place in like June, July of 1990, so it's right after the main Async timeline that we see in the web series. Also, in the end credits, we hear more wind chimes. We hear audio from the third test, the YouTube video where Async's describing like how they first made contact with the complex. And also in the special thanks section, it says, "Special thanks, Ivan Beck," which is hilarious. He's always there. He's at the back of everything. We just haven't seen him yet. So I think really the biggest character that's on display in this film, and the reason I think this was such a good introduction to general audiences about the Backrooms, is the Backrooms themselves. Like, think about it. We have Clark as our primary protagonist, and then, like I said, Mary works as sort of his foil, like another direction to take a similar amount of grief that you're living with. And we have Mary, who represents a diversion away from the complex and almost disgust with it. And we have Clark, who represents someone who finds a home in it, someone that likes it there. The uncanny set dressing is secondary to its real purpose, the loops, the staying right where you are. And because of that, it almost ascribes a bitterness to the complex itself. Like, it takes these moments from what we've seen, mostly negative ones, like Clark failing to make his commercial and appearing as a fool. You know, the guy wants to be an architect dressed up as a pirate and then breaking a chair. And then like Mary's house that traumatized her and the rubble of it and that moment that she's in the interrogation. If you want to give like a literalist reason for why it may be that way, perhaps the complex takes snapshots of high moments of like emotional intensity or, you know, emotional distress. But what that means in practice is that not only is the complex alien and off-putting in its aesthetics, but it's off-putting in the things it is depicting. It's off-putting in its source material. It's like the psychology concept of the id, like the deep down, the base parts of humanity that our natural instincts climb out of. It's like the complex only takes snapshots of our memories when we're in that place. It's a manifestation of our subconscious, but just like the animalistic parts of it. And I think all of the things that the film demonstrate does such a great job at getting people in on the concept. It's this place that's practically infinite. It bases itself off of our real memories, or at the very least, our real spaces. And the monsters that are down there are ourselves, just manifested in our worst characteristics. And it sets up a great idea of the Backrooms being the movie's monster, like the space itself, but it also does it in a way that you don't really have to get into all the themes and like, oh, how this relates to the characters and stuff like that. Just the idea of a place that copies your worst memories forever is scary, especially when the whole environment is, dare I say, liminal and already uncomfortable in the first place. To realize what is being built in that uncomfortable state is far worse. Now, there's a few lore implications that I want to talk about as well. For one, we see that when the complex was creating that null zone in the bottom of the furniture store, that it was physically drawing off of electricity within the furniture store. And from what we know, the only access points are in the Southern California area around Async, because they opened the threshold, right? But we also see random stuff grabbed from like China with the Mao poster from Found Footage 3. So maybe it can reach into places across the world and then bring influence of them in, but we don't know that people can access it from around the planet, right? At least not yet. Give Async some time. I'm sure they'll make it worse. But maybe since it needs electricity to grow, or at least sustain itself, or maybe open up gateways, maybe the complex is kind of under the earth, physically spreading out. Maybe the reason more null zones are popping up around the Southern California area is because it's using the energy grid to move. And then there's other stuff I talked about in the last video that could affect it, like sunlight, solar storms could do a lot with opening up new passageways, or maybe just solar energy. And then, of course, we have a lot of theories that we had from the web series confirmed. The complex is, in fact, copying real spaces, but according to the movie, it seems to be much more person-based than place-based. Like, obviously, it's copying places, but it seems to be at least highlighting details from people's memory of those spaces. Things like the Christmas tree and the people on the floor, like the less remembered versus the more remembered. Maybe because the guy in the wheelchair with the lamp was so prominent down there. And then since, the barber still life's walking around, maybe it just found its way in there. But maybe when that space was copied, it was someone's memory about the guy in the wheelchair sitting next to the lamp. And that's the reason everything else was kind of vague around it. And maybe details like the guy sitting at the table with Clark and Mary, maybe whoever remembered him remembered like his big nose and his large eyes. So those are the things that got copied over and over. So it seems that human influence has more to do with what gets printed down there than we initially thought. And the biggest place that seems relevant to me is Clark's still life. So the captain's huge, right? Taller than Clark. And I theorized earlier, maybe that's because, at the moment that Clark was copied, it's because he was presenting this larger than life, showmanship version of himself. And that's possible. It's also possible just because Clark spent so much time basically at a threshold that there was just more and more information, so it physically grew the size of his still life. Because if that's the case, that just larger than life personalities in the area get bigger. I mean, Clark was doing local commercials for a furniture store. I mean, there's celebrities in the region and politicians. Are they Godzilla size in the complex somewhere? So maybe proximity to the threshold has more to do with it than anything. But also, if that's the case, then wouldn't there be a ton of 10-foot tall async researchers walking around? Because they're near the threshold all the time. I initially thought maybe the reason Clark's became that way is because maybe another still life variant was created when he entered the complex, when he walked through the null zone, because the complex is our memories, right? It doesn't account for us being there. I also think that's the reason that they don't really feel pain. Clark walks over to the barber still life and scalps it, and it has no reaction. But when the captain walks in, it freaks out. I don't think that's because the still lifes don't register any negative sensory thing, because obviously the barber still life was afraid of the Clark still life. I think instead they simply don't register people, right? People can walk up to the kind of passive still lifes and do whatever they want because the complex doesn't account for people being there. We're never supposed to be there. But they do account and interact with each other. Some have pointed to the scene when Clark turns off the lights that the one in the wheelchair clicks on the lamp as that wheelchair still life interacting with Clark, but I think that was more so reaction to the lights in the room getting turned off. It just turns on the lamp whenever it's dark. And honestly, I don't know. I'm saying right now, I have theories as to why the captain was as menacing and tall as he was, but there's just not enough information to say anything conclusive yet. There's room to speculate, but that's all. I also think the explanation that some still lifes are just hostile and kill other still lifes explain a lot of the stuff we see in the complex in the web series. There's a lot of blood and clothesline everywhere, and I had previously theorized this is maybe just a ton of people falling into null zones. And I still think a lot of people do, as seen from the missing persons rates getting higher and higher. Before the sheer amount of carnage we see the aftermath of in some of the YouTube segments, these may just be still lifes killing other still lifes. I'm not saying they're all Pirate Clark, but if he was just near a null zone and it attributed his worst parts and that came out as violence, then there's probably other people who similarly have violent still lives. Like, look at the one in Found Footage 3 that chased the cameraman. I've heard some people say that that's Waldad, the guy at the end who flashes through, and I've already talked about in that video how there's like time distortion in the back room. So even though in Found Footage 3 he hadn't no-clipped into the complex yet, maybe the fact that he does so in the future was enough to make his still life violent. Which actually, now that I say that, that may be the explanation as to why Clark's still life is violent. Maybe the still life was in there passive, but because at some point in the future, Clark passes into the complex, that retroactively makes his still life this violent monster. Like I said, a lot of questions have been answered, like the nature of the complex, what the complex is actually doing, but then it raises more questions about still lives. Like, we know what they are, literally, but the nature of why some of them are the way that they are, like why Clark's is, or why the one that chased the cameraman in Found Footage 3 is, not sure yet. I'm sure there is an explanation, and we will find it out later, just not now. I think what this movie was at its core was a film to introduce people to the Backrooms and creating a narrative through the characters that express that, almost using Clark as an avatar for the complex itself. And I think it did such a great job with that. Again, I'm like too close to the series and the lore and stuff to really figure out what someone who's never seen any of Kane's work online would think going into this. I don't know if maybe some of the themes would be too confusing or if they would get across the right way. But to me, personally, I loved it. Seeing reactions from people online, it seems that people who are new to the series either love it or hate it. And I think that's just a matter of if a lot of the themes worked for you. I've seen some people saying that they were confused why the complex, like, we get so many hints about like the mystique of it and stuff, but so much time was spent on the two characters. But again, I think it works because if you listen to the story of the two characters, it is the story and the nature of the complex without having a scientist walk around with a clipboard saying things like, I believe it stays in loops of mental trauma or whatever. It portrays that through people, and then their relation to the complex can be used to infer the nature of the complex itself. And I think that's a really neat narrative choice. Kane has said that this is not the end. He has ideas for everything from sequels to a TV show. If a TV show happens, I expect that's where we'll get more about async and Ivan Beck, questions we've been asking for a long time. But for a first shot, like I said at the beginning, I'm blown away. This dude's been making YouTube videos for years, and he makes one movie, and it is the biggest deal. I couldn't be more proud of how this turned out. I couldn't be more impressed with the final product. And also, I can't tell you how much this has turned the tables for not just horror movies, but for filmmaking in general. After studios saw the success of this and Obsession back to back, it has got a ton of people talking. And I know you've seen all the headlines about like, oh, well, now, production companies are just going to Reddit looking for ideas. And every time something like this happens, inevitably studios learn the wrong lesson. So there will probably be some of that. But I can't go into any details right now because a lot of stuff is still hypothetical. But I'll just say that nearly everyone I know who makes YouTube web series, not just like, YouTubers, like people who have these ideas and they have established lore and worlds they're building, pretty much every one of them I know has gotten multiple phone calls since this movie came out. Yeah, are there going to be directors and people who don't understand the space who are handed scripts from like internet horror or creepy threads and create another Slender Man movie? Probably. But I can also tell you there are a lot of people who have been honing their craft for nearly a decade who are about to get a shot of a lifetime because of the success of this movie. I am so excited to see where the horror genre goes from here. I'm so excited to see where filmmaking goes from here. There have been people who have been cultivating their craft online, and now they are getting budgets and they are getting audiences to do it justice. And all of that would not have happened if not for, again, Curry Barker's Obsession, incredible movie, go see it. And also this guy, and these other guys. I feel crazy even saying it because, we've been talking for years that some of the coolest stories we've ever come across are just uploaded to YouTube. And then you see another sequel extended universe thing come out in theaters, and if you're like me, you just ignore it and go back to where the real storytelling is, online. It's not to say, obviously, that like movies have been devoid of talent, but you get what I mean. You know the exact kind of movies I'm talking about. But I also love filmmaking, and I love the theater, and I love the scope, and I love creators getting this whole fanfare around them and being able to create exactly what they wanted to make. And it was always frustrating that there was a disconnect between the people who had the resources that made that possible and the people I was watching who were telling these incredible stories that deserved their time in the spotlight. But because of Backrooms, those two are finally becoming one. And the lesson isn't, well, at least the lesson isn't to a lot of people. There's probably some that have learned this lesson. But to a lot of people, the lesson isn't, let's find these cool ideas online and just attach whoever to make it, and then we'll just print money. No, to a lot of these production companies, the lesson has been, these guys already know what they're doing and they make incredible things. What do we need to give them to do that at a bigger and better scale? I mean, it just got announced while I was recording this video that Curry Barker just secured an 8-figure deal for his next film. It's amazing. It's almost like you use a storytelling platform and give it to proven storytellers, and then they'll tell a story that people are interested in seeing. Who would have ever thought of that? I speak with a little bit of vitriol just because it feels like it took so long to get here, but now we're finally here, and I'm so excited to see where it goes. And again, a lot of it is because of this guy's standing behind me. I've seen the Backrooms 3 times in theater now, and every time I see it, I just want to stay there. From the way it looks, to the way it's scored, to the way it's shot, just all of it feels so cohesive and feels like I'm a part of a different world. It truly feels like a movie in a way a lot of movies haven't felt for a long time. This is going to be the floodgates to, I think, a lot of incredible stories, and I could not be more proud that I got to know the guy who made it happen. When you're watching this, congratulations, dude. I said it before and I'll say it now. This couldn't have happened to someone more deserving. So to everyone else, get the merch, support the film, make sure that good things are given good attention. I couldn't be more excited for what's to come, and in whatever capacity I can, when Kane does something else, I'll cover it too. And when a lot of these other guys who I've known for a long time get their shot at the spotlight, I'll be there for that as well. I love storytelling, and I love seeing storytellers be able to tell the story that they want to tell. Feels like we're at the forefront of something great, and I can't wait to see it. And hopefully you can as well, and I'm glad that you stuck around to hear me rant about it, and I really appreciate it, and I just want to say thank you for watching. Like, I'm telling y'all, give it like another 2-3 years. I think you're going to be blown away by the things that are about to start getting made. I'm excited. I can't wait. And all of this is so inspiring. Like I said, the reason I started making YouTube videos is because I saw guys who I watch their content and appreciate just make it. And it was like, why can't I do that? You know, like if YouTube is something that anyone can grab a hold of, then why not? And now with these guys who just taught themselves Blender while they were in high school, I mean, there's so much talent that can now be cultivated online in so many unique ways. Like, if you think you have a story to tell, why not give it a shot? Films like The Backrooms aren't only great, they're inspiring, and they leave an impact. And I think we're going to see the ramifications of that impact over the next few decades. So thank you to Kane for letting me come to the set and come to the premiere and be a very small part in the promotion of this. And thank you to A24 for putting up with my shenanigans before, during, and after. I'll quit rambling. Enough said. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Again, subscribe. I upload here like once, maybe twice a month if I'm feeling fruity. And then over on Wendigang, we upload Mondays at noon. And then Wendiglitch, whenever I actually give the editor material to edit, he posts over there pretty frequently. It's my fault, I promise. I've got a lot of very cool announcements coming up very soon. The next video that should be going up is one a lot of you guys have been asking for a long time, so stay tuned for that. All in all, I believe that should do it for now. Support the Backrooms however you can. Kane certainly deserves it, as well as, you know, all the other people that made the film possible and did a really good job, but you can tell where my loyalties lie. But I believe that should do it for now. Before I go, I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. You know, I talked to Kane the night before the premiere. We went out and got dinner together. And he told me that before I came to the movie set, that there was a conversation between him and the guy who is building the Rolling Giant of how hard it would be logistically to come to Vancouver and build the entire Rolling Giant and just hide it somewhere on set. Not to appear in the movie, not to have any purpose other than the purpose that I would be walking through the Backrooms by myself and run into the Rolling Giant. And it didn't happen because, they were making a movie and that was complicated enough. And logistically, it just made no sense. But he said there was an email chain and they were considering it. So if you ever think this beef between Kane and I is fake, if you ever think he's not actually so petty as to do something that complex just to ruin my day, just know that. So when I do things like this is completely justified. This isn't even close to retaliation. This is like step one. It can get way worse. And it probably will. So stay tuned for that.